I will be moderating this session. Stitha, you can take over.
A very good afternoon to you, sir. Am I
Good
audible?
afternoon. Yes, you are.
We are honored to have with us a special guest, Mr. Steve Correa. On behalf of Department of Management Studies, IIT Roorkee, I, Stitha Pragya, feel honored to welcome him to this institution. Steve is an experienced corporate professional with more than 30 years of professional experience, working within organizations and also an executive coach. His educational background includes XLRI, a Chevening Scholarship, a certification from NTL on OD, is a professional member of Sunedas and an executive coach. He has been in senior leadership roles at Diageo, Jio, Patni, Vodafone, and has worked on Hindustan Unilever and Xerox as well. We are delighted that Steve has agreed to share his perspectives on discovering Indianness and the Indian leader. His talk will largely draw from his book, The Indian Boss at Work, which will release on 25th September 2020. Some of you would have already read the book summary available on this website. We will have time for question and answer at the end of the session. Do type in your questions at any time on the chat as the session progresses. So without much further ado, I'm pleased to hand over to Steve to guide you through the discovering Indianness and the Indian leader.
Thank you, Stitha. And
Thank you, sir.
acknowledgements to Professor Agrawal for kindly inviting me to this presentation. Swati, initially, who helped manage the logistics and the coordination, and later Rohan, who has been a stellar in terms of all the planning and logistics and the tech support that went in prior to this webinar. And of course, to all of you students who've chosen to take your Sunday off and spend the next 90 minutes with me. I deeply appreciate that. All right.
So the honors are absolutely ours, sir.
So,
We are pleased and absolutely honored to have you.
so let us begin. I'd like for us to look at the screen and the lamp, and behind the lamp is the mandala, which in the Indic tradition means a circle. And mandala in Indic philosophy denotes creativity of a powerful existence. And it's really a symbol of deep connection with the self and the universe at large. The diya, which is a common ritual in all our auspicious ceremonies, signifies purity, goodness, good luck, and power. The presence of light means the non existence of darkness and of evil forces. I wish for these 90 minutes to be a deep, immersive experience connecting us to both our heads and our hearts, and hopefully our soul. Take a moment and bring all your attention to the here and now and the world around us at this moment. Whenever you feel comfortable, bring all your attention to your breath. Notice your breath breathing in and breathing out, taking in the life breath, which is called the prana, and observe all the sensations as you breathe deeply in and breathing out. And if you feel comfortable, gently close your eyes. Continue to focus on your breath while listening to all the sounds around you. And the deeper you breathe, the more you find yourself relaxed. And the more you are relaxed, the deeper you find yourself breathing. Pay attention to your body. Notice the feet on the floor, the buttocks on your chair or bed, your back, and bring all your attention to your body, continuing to bring your presence to your breath. Listen to the sounds around you, my sound, my words, and sink lower and deeper and deeper. And the deeper you go, the more relaxed you are. Relaxed, 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 deeply relaxed. And stay on, breathing deeply into the silence that follows. And whenever you're comfortable, open your eyes and we will begin. Thank you for indulging me on this exercise. And we will start now with discovering Indianness and the Indian leader. In Indian tradition, leadership is not a destination, a, but it's a quest. Indian tradition would have the leader continuously engaging in the science of anvikshiki, which is to have the science of inquiry. And it evokes the spirit of how to think. Hetu Shastra, Hetu Vidya, and evokes self control and discipline. The Indian leader lives amidst questions, not answers, and which is summarized in the Upanishad in the words Neti Neti Charaiveti, which is not here, move on. So come along with me on a journey to discover Indianness and the Indian leader. But let me begin by sharing my own journey. It was November 2011. I'm at a national HR conference. A global Caucasian HR speaker is sharing his perspectives on leadership practice. Someone like you in the audience raises his hands. He remarks about an ancient thought and urges that we all need to develop our own indigenous Indian model. Now, several delegates, they all speak or raise their hands and they agree with this man. Curious, the global speaker invites if someone in that 1100 size audience would be willing to come up on the stage and explain, elaborate on one Indian way of management. There was an awkward silence. Everyone looked at everyone else. Someone finally gets up and makes a few points on stage. I don't remember what it was, but he said something about Indian. You know, at that moment, I experienced a moment of epiphany. I realized that my own knowledge of Indian leadership practice was unsatisfactory. And when I discussed with others at the conference and later in the several months that followed, I discovered for most of us, the corporate leaders, at least the ones I spoke to, that our foundational knowledge of Indianness is woefully inadequate. Yet, we follow it unconsciously. But beyond the surface understanding and some mild intuition, there is less attention given to it and its impact and application at the workplace. I wondered, what kind of training do we provide young leaders like you at IIT Roorkee and the IIMs and so on once they enter and as they grow in the workplace? How well do you and other young leaders understand Indianness and the contextual cultural codes? For what no one tells you, my friends, is that leadership is an art and a craft. But between the art and the craft lies business. And I am convinced that the ABC of leadership must be learned. So that was my first stirring of this whole journey of discovering Indianness. So I started to write my book 2 years ago. And like a Hindi movie, you shoot all the scenes, you write all the pages. But I wondered if what I was saying was prejudiced by my own darshana, by my own bias, by my own eyes, and my own upbringing. So I decided to jump into the ocean of Indian psychology and Indian citation. It was like merely a snorkeling, not scuba diving. And once I went snorkeling into the waters of Indianness, I realized vast treasures, deep, vast, unexplored. I wondered if our hoary past, which includes cosmic collectivism, tolerance and harmony, co holding differences, acceptance and adaptability, spiritual quotient, which includes duties to others and the self, ethics, ecological balance, the hierarchical order, and the regional collectivism. Do these have answers to modern day leadership practice? I sent my book out to many sociologists, anthropologists, academia, corporate leaders for their observations, for their challenges. I looked at and finally ended up with 600 citations in my book. And there is plenty of Indian research, plenty. But the problem with Indian research is that the sample sizes are a few years back in smaller regions, in smaller pockets. The sample sizes are low. And we rather talk about some global speaker and some global technology and some global ideas rather than local ideas. And therefore, there isn't enough of building on each other's ideas in India. So it has not reached international eyes. So I then decided, all right, I could write some patterns about Indianness based on research and based on my 35 years of working experience. But is it true for leaders? I then decided to go and talk to a couple of senior people. You've seen in the slide so Mittal, Harsh Mariwal, Naina Kidwai, and I interviewed Kiran Mazumdar, I asked them several questions regarding the way they think, the way they feel, the way they act, to see if they were consciously or unconsciously demonstrating some of the Indian ideas that I had put out in my book. Only then would I feel satisfied that yes, the notions that I talk about are really, uh, you know, the kind of praxis, not theory, but the praxis that's happening in the business place. So, what is it that you will learn in the next 90 minutes? At the end of the next 90 minutes, I hope that you will think about Indianness and you will think about the Indian leader inside you. I hope that you will feel proud to be from a country which is the oldest living civilization of 7,000 years of history. And I hope that you too will jump like me with your snorkels and jump into the water to discover your Indianness and what it means in terms of personal personal leadership. If this happens, this is what I would feel most proud about at the end of this presentation. But there are some rules in the Indic wisdom to grasp the knowledge. To grasp the knowledge, one needs to have the Shravana, which is to listen, the Manana, which is to understand, and finally the Nidhyasana, to be able to contemplate deeply. Something like in the Yoga Sutra, the last three limbs, which is Dhyana, Dharana, and Samadhi. And so, since all of you are engineers, if you read first five chapters of water or of force or of energy, the sixth, seventh, and eighth chapter become easier because you've built your foundation in the first five. Unfortunately, in the world of people, the first five chapters does not make the sixth, seventh, and eighth chapter easier. In fact, the sixth, seventh, and eighth chapter become even more complex as you go down into the human spirit. Because in the world of science, there is a causal relationship. In the world of the inner self, there is the Vedant, which is the understanding of the self. And therefore, in this session, I need for you to be able to follow a deep synoptical way of understanding what I am saying. And that's not my advice. This comes from the ancient Upanishads. In my presentation, I am going to cover three big ideas. The three big ideas are the East and the West ways of thinking. Now, please remember, I do not mean Turkey and to the west, and that is west, and then Turkey and the east, and that is east. I don't mean geography. I simply mean a kind of an orientation and approach to thinking. And let me quickly jump in and say that you, Advaita or Stithi and others, actually all have an Indian way of thinking. Yeah? We all have an Indian way of thinking. Now, the second big idea that I'll explore with you is the idea of Indianness. And third, just touch on the facets of the Indian leader. Now, before I go to the first idea of East and West, I want to ask you a question. And please write on the chat box one letter. Either you write D for distinctive or you write S for similar. Based on your living experience, not on your intellect, based on your living experience, do you believe that human beings are similar or distinctive? Your time begins now. The challenges and the imperatives that and dilemmas that humans face across the world, they are very, very similar. But how each society responds to it is actually very different, and it is cultural. Some society, some societies, they encourage you to be compliant, to follow rules, and some societies expect you to be very outspoken and have critical thinking and be self-independent and so on. So depending on what society you come, there are certain society and considers appropriate in managing with some of the global challenges. Can you all hear me clearly right now?
Yes, sir, you're audible, sir.
Okay. Now, let me take you through a very famous story of by a German philosopher. His name is Arthur Schopenhauer. In 1851, he offers a very powerful metaphor of two hedgehogs who, on a cold night, which is called the porcupine dilemma, they approach each other for warmth. And if they stick too close to each other, they have to accept the pain of being pricked by the quail of the other. He concludes, that is the Western view, that it is always better to be a little bit with a little distance from each other. And that we cannot exist without working with each other. So for each one of us, there is a desire to be myself, independent, and there's also a desire to be a part of, interdependent. And some societies are more towards independence, and some societies are more towards interdependence. It doesn't mean that it is one or the other, a binary, but it's a leaning towards one or the other, which is what I would call as an individualistic society or a collectivist or communalist society of collectivity. And on your chat box, please tell me, what do you think India is? Individualistic or collectivist? So, absolutely right. So, while all of you are saying collectivist, the collectivist is socially approved collectivist. But don't get fooled by Indians. Indians are also very independent. In fact, equally independent like the Americans. But it is restrained by society, restrained. So there are moments when the society gives permission, such as a daughter's wedding or son's wedding, there will be very high indulgence. But most times, people will be very restrained in the way they appear to the others. But deep inside, there is strong individualism. And if you ask someone why he comes to IIT Roorkee to give presentations, he'll say, I'm doing this for my company. But he will not say, I'm also doing it for my vested interest to create my personal brand. We say we are earning for our families to put our children to good college, but you're also earning for your own enjoyment. So we are collectivists, but deep inside we are also individualistic, and that's what I want you to understand. That some societies value if you leave your house at the age of 19, leave your parents and create your own life. And in our society, we expect the son to stay with the parents, also look after the parents when they are, old and so on. So it's all about valuing in societies. So let me jump to the big difference between East and West. I started by telling you that it's not a geography, it's an orientation. And please remember that you have to remember that you have got both these darshanas inside you. So now you tell me which one is more prominent inside you. Where do you find yourself tilting towards? And why do I say you have got East and West in you? Because you come from 7,000 history, which is primary system, and you are living in a modern world which has come from the colonial kind of living, and you have learned English, and you are aping the Western world, and you are learning a lot of stuff that's come from the West, including the workplace. So you have got two orientations, Eastern and Western. So now you tell me which of these are what you believe in. The first, with regards to the Western orientation. The West believed in one good life. After you die, you will go to heaven everlasting. Everlasting. That's why in our good life, in some societies, after death, it's forever. If you have one good life, then death brings that life to an end. And if there is death and you fear it, then all that you do psychologically is about avoiding death. And in that society, in Western, it is all horizontal and vertical lines. So, like ballet dancing, horizontal, vertical. Unlike the Indian life, which is cyclical, and you have all the dance and Bharatnatyam and music. Those of you who play music, there's an outer rag, then an inner sound, then an inner rag, and an inner thing, and then there's embellishment, and then there's jugalbandi, and it's always circular, not straight. Whereas in Western music, there are sharps and there are flats, and it's all from left to right. Now, you all are all engineers, and you know in engineering what is the meaning of engineering truth, a scientific truth. It is a scientific truth. If there is reductionist positivism, in the sense that you will have to be objective, you will have to be impersonal, no personal bias, has to be quantifiable, it has to be controlled, it has to have a control group, and it has to have an experiment. And therefore, you must be able to take the variable and isolate it and watch it and see whether it behaves in a particular way. But in the case of, can you all hear me now? I'm seeing some kind of check. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah, okay, thank you. For saying low band. Now, if you look at much of the literature that's coming from the West, they seem to suggest that life is on the y by x axis, a diagonal. And in the diagonal, you have to keep on striving to get the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And so you have to constantly move up. And they seem to give an idea that advancement and culture and betterment comes from a kind of a life similar to Western, industrialized, affluent societies. And that is what we all must do to reach Xanadu. And what the Western literature also does, it removes the cultural context in which the leadership is to be seen. Or at least it did. Later, there have been studies by Hofstede and by Trompener and by Globe. But they have used paired words to look at categorizing the world in terms of what is the kind of world that exists. And in this kind of orientation, they have cleansed the culture from being a variable. Because if culture comes up, then they would argue saying that, no, that should be studied under anthropology. But what is the point of looking at seeds if you don't study the soil? Because the soil has to receive the pearls of leadership wisdom. So I have been looking at not just the literature of the